Welp, it's happening now. If you're like me and occasionally browse the Demented Bird app, or someone who likes to keep up with news on the latest media being released, you've no doubt heard that Warner Bros. Has announced they want to make a new batch of Lord of the Rings movies. And worse yet, it's rumored they plan to turn them into a large cinematic franchise like Star Wars.
No, sir, I don't like it.
You know, it was only a matter of time. It's been 20 years since Return of the King released, and after slowly tearing through one IP after another, Hollywood has finally made like Smog and have come to plunder the treasure trove that is Tolkien's work. Again. This comes at a time where these huge studios need larger and larger amounts of money to sustain themselves, and the only thing that seems to keep them going are widely recognized IPs. This is further elaborated on in this Hollywood Reporter article covering the entire ordeal. The article states, "The reveal comes at a precarious time for Warner's, with the studio admitting a $2.1 billion loss in Q4. The company seems to be circling its wagons even tighter around familiar IP, focusing on surefire brands like DC. Though there are no scripts yet, one insider suggests to the Hollywood Reporter that Warner Bros. Hopes to turn Lord of the Rings into a Star Wars-like franchise. First, and I think this is important, they are not remaking the original trilogy, so that's good. What they are doing is developing new stories set in Tolkien's world. That's a huge difference. However, knowing the sort of financial spot Warner Bros. Is in, I don't think they're doing this because someone at Warner Bros. Wants to explore Middle-earth with the same sort of passion Jackson and his team did with the original films. Instead, it's clear they're doing this for one very obvious reason.
Money.
Now, it's probably no mystery what my position on all of this is. You read the title of the video. Simply put, I'm not very optimistic about these movies. Almost every major multi-movie cinematic franchise trying to develop new stories to explore or continue a widely recognized IP has struggled to produce anything of quality. The DCU has fumbled about with finding an identity for itself. Of the tons of Star Wars content we've received over the last 10 years, only a handful of it is really notable. And I'm not even going to talk about Star Trek. That's just sad. And the Rings of Power, despite being based on content from the Silmarillion, is about as close to modern original Lord of the Rings content as there is. And it's, well...
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
Because they're made of wood. Good!
If you've heard about this news, then I'm sure you've seen this meme before. But despite this meme being a parody, this could very well be a reality where we get a movie about Gandalf's origins. You know, that isn't the Rings of Power. Or a series of what-if shorts, or who knows, maybe they'll make that Tom Bombadil musical starring James Corden people memed about or something. God forbid. Regardless, it's clear Warner Bros. Is in need of some delicious IP cash. And while not always the case, generally when Hollywood makes something purely for money, the quality doesn't end up being very good. But some people might see this article and think something along the lines of, but they haven't written any scripts yet. They just made an announcement, so who knows? Maybe they could be good movies. And plus they might explore aspects of Tolkien's world we've never seen before, so who knows? They could be good. Now, there is the possibility these movies can be good. After all, nothing has been actually released about them. No scripts have been written, no concepts have been put forward. We have nothing to go off of. And I'm sure that in the right hands, these movies could be interesting. Actually, despite all my cynicism, I welcome the idea that I'm wrong and that these movies do end up being good. And listen, I know it may not seem like it given the subject of this video, but I'm generally a pretty optimistic guy. But I just don't think they're going to be good. A YouTube creator named Two Left Frames made an excellent video titled, "Why We'll Never See Anything Like the Lord of the Rings Trilogy Again." And I have to agree with him. Lord of the Rings has been adapted a few times during the late 20th century, but it wasn't until Peter Jackson went around pitching his passion project that he could finally adapt Tolkien's novels into 3 sprawling epics, the likes of which Hollywood had never seen and maybe will never see again. It was a bit of a miracle the Lord of the Rings films even happened. You have to realize that prior to Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson was a small-time director known for making cheap horror movies. And before he tackled Tolkien's trilogy, the only real big thing he did to become notable in Hollywood was win an Oscar for Heavenly Creatures with his wife. And that doesn't even begin to cover how negatively fantasy was viewed by Hollywood at the time. These days, fantasy films and shows are being made left and right, but back then, fantasy was a genre that didn't bring in numbers. In fact, even some of the most popular and widely recognized fantasy films prior to Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy barely made their budgets back, and that's if they were lucky. Jackson's Lord of the Rings films are an engrossing 3-act story told masterfully across 3 incredible films. And it wasn't just Tolkien's story that made those films work. It was the love, care, and passion of Jackson and his team that went into nearly every aspect of the movies that made them amazing. A kind of passion that genuinely inspires. A kind of love and care I don't think we'll see in a Lord of the Rings film again. I mean, look at The Hobbit, for example. Peter and a lot of his team returned for those films, but because the studio wanted to make the biggest bang for their buck, rather than give him the time he needed to prepare, we instead got 3 long movies filled with goofy CG fight scenes and milquetoast side stories to pad out the films, which they could have easily trimmed off in post-production. Of course, the truth behind why these films failed is a lot more nuanced than that, but that's just a few reasons the movies didn't work. And when you look at something like The Rings of Power, you can see, despite what their marketing would have you believe, that it had about as much love and care put into it as a Chinese concrete building. Only time can tell what will happen, but if the constant trend of terrible remakes and lukewarm additions to already established universes is anything to go off of, then I don't expect these new movies to be good. It takes a lot for me to pause the projects I'm working on to make a quick video like this, but this did it. Listen, Peter Jackson's movies are not perfect, and if you can believe it, they have and continue to receive backlash by hardcore fans of the books for the liberties he took and the characters and locations he cut out. But on their own, they're amazing movies that anyone, fans of the books or not, can enjoy. If the rumors are true and they plan to make Tolkien's work into some original, long-running film franchise over the course of 10 or more years like Disney is doing with Star Wars, it's not something I believe a financially desperate modern Hollywood studio can pull off. At least not in this day and age anymore. Obviously, in the modern day, there are exceptions. I just watched the newest addition to the Puss in Boots franchise, if that's what you want to call it, and that movie is fantastic. I love this movie, it's so good. And we have recently gotten a few really good adaptations of video games and popular IPs. But for every Andor, we get heaps of lukewarm originals. And lukewarm is being a little generous, because some of the new stuff that they're coming out with in some of these franchises is not good.
Like a panther. Yes?
Anyway, what are your thoughts on this announcement? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Or not, it's up to you. Well, that's all I have to say about that. I'm open to being wrong, but until I'm proven otherwise, I'm not very optimistic about these upcoming movies. That's just me.